Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or you can download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple, Android, Fire TV and Roku TV as well. Now, even as the Bayelsa judgment controversy rages, a federal high court sitting in Abuja has fixed March the 11th to the 13th, 2020, for the trial of the convener of the Revolution Now, Mr. Omoyele Sowore and Olawale Bakare. The trial judge, Justice Ijoma Ojukwu, fixed the dates after the defendants pleaded not guilty to amended counts of conspiracy to commit treasonable felony. Mr. Sowore, while pleading his innocence, informed the court that he pleaded not guilty based on the advice of his legal team. But the case could not go on due to the inability of the prosecution to provide a DVD player to enable them view evidence against the defendants.
Like we have always said, that the prosecuting team is not ready with his case. The witness statement we requested for in November, 3 months later, we have not been served. The court just ruled this morning that we should be served before the next date for definite trial, which is 11th, 12th, and 13th of March 2020. Like we have always made known to Nigerians, we are ready. There's nothing in the case of the prosecuting team, and whenever they are ready. 2 items we have asked for. They said in the summary of the statement they served on us in court this morning, I must also emphasize that those summaries are summaries of what we were previously served. Previously served. They made reference to video clips and tape recordings. They are vital materials to our defense, and we have asked the prosecuting team to serve these materials on us.
It's on record now that a witness was in court and ready to testify today. We have our witness in court today. And you know the issue of documents under the law, before judgment at any time, we can file additional evidence and serve it on them. They're just in a hurry. We will have given them whatever they want in due course. The only thing I can say is that we comply with court order. There's compliance with court order, but I don't know if it's about money, but I know the prosecution has complied with the order of this honorable court.
Let's cross over to Abuja now. Here's Ibrahim Adra. Ibrahim?
Hi, Ijoma, good to see you. Now, lawmakers in the Imo State House of Assembly have passed a vote of confidence on the Supreme Court of Nigeria for declaring Governor Hope Uzodinma winner of the 2019 governorship election. This follows a motion moved by the lawmaker representing Obowo State constituency, Kennedy Ibe, during a special plenary session. The motion also called on security operatives to immediately arrest and prosecute the returning officer in the election, and the Imo State Resident Electoral Commissioner for unconstitutionally declaring Mr. Emeka Ihedioha as winner of the election. Now, achieving Sustainable Development Goal 6, which is access to clean water and sanitation in Nigeria by the year 2030, would require that the country triples its budget or at least allocate 1.7% of the current gross domestic product to water, sanitation and hygiene. And that's according to the World Bank. Now, the need is more acute in the rural areas where the gap for improved sanitation services is about 64%. However, the responsibility of water supply in Nigeria is shared among the 3 levels of government, although that of sanitation is not clearly defined. Our correspondent, Ini John Mekwa, reports.
About 71% of the Earth's surface is covered with water, yet the United Nations estimates that more than 2 billion people are currently faced with the risk of reduced access to freshwater resources. And by 2050, at least 1 in 4 people is likely to live in a country affected by chronic or recurring shortages of fresh water. The figures are not encouraging in Nigeria, where only 26.5% of the population use improved drinking water sources and sanitation facilities, according to the findings of the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF.
The coastal region is urban, indiscriminate urban expansion.
Pollution is another explanation for the lack of safe drinking water. In many rural areas, underground water is dug manually without necessary precautions. The same source of water is also used for other domestic needs. It gets more worrisome as records show that these are the same areas where 23.5% of the population defecates in the open. This has increased the use of contaminated drinking water and poor sanitary conditions, resulting in increased vulnerability to waterborne diseases, which leads to deaths of more than 70,000 children under 5 years annually.
A lot of people still practice open defecation, and we have flooding. The feces is washed into their streams of water, and they drink from that same source. There is an outbreak. So those people are at risk of having cholera, having diarrhea diseases.
The solution lies in creating more sources of clean water. And so in March 2019, the federal government inaugurated a national strategic plan tagged Village Level Operation and Maintenance to boost supply of potable water to rural dwellers, to be coordinated by the Ministry of Water Resources.
We must do it in a sustainable way.
The Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs, Mrs. Adejoke Orelekwe Adefulire, reveals that they hope to achieve this by collaborating with other tiers of government.
But Mr. President has agreed, has encouraged both our office and 3 other agencies of government and the National Assembly to please look at how we implement the constituency project and other projects under the federal government and state government working together to ensure that we provide for the needs of our people.
Meeting the target of water, sanitation and hygiene by 2030 also requires that the issue of open defecation is eliminated. A tall order, since UNICEF reveals that 47 million people still defecate in the open and only 7% of schools have access to basic wash for children and teachers. Ini John McCoy reporting for Channels Television News.
Many thanks indeed, Ini. Now let's get more perspective on the subject, and we're being joined now on the news at 10 by Mr. Zaid Joji, is the Chief of Section WASH Program. Mr. Joji, thank you so much for joining us on the news at 10.
Pleasure.
Let me begin by giving you these figures by the UNICEF, which says about 26.5% of the population in Nigeria have improved drinking water sources and sanitation facilities. That's across the country. I'm curious, what part of the country is this feat achieved?
Well, when we speak about a figure as low as 26.5%, I don't think it matters really. I mean, there's a difference. It starts with 8%, which is the lowest, and this is in Ebony, and the highest is about 60%, and this is in Anambra. And here the figure discusses the availability of both water and sanitation. So usually it's water, sanitation, and hygiene. So when we study the three together, the overlap area is even smaller than this figure, and it goes down to 11% only.
So this is really nothing to be very happy about, is it?
Absolutely, it is nothing. And I mean, one of the figures that were mentioned in the report is the level of open defecation in the country, which is 24%, or 1 in 4 people in Nigeria practice open defecation. This is a very bad indicator, and in fact, it puts Nigeria in the second spot worldwide. After India. Of course, India, there has been a lot of work that was done, and now maybe Nigeria is taking the first place, and this is something that Nigerians cannot be proud of.
And again, this is in spite of a state of emergency declared in that section by the federal government.
There is a state of emergency declared by the federal government, and there is an open defecation commitment by the year 2025 based on the national roadmap for ending open defecation, and this is done by the president. But work here, we cannot talk only about federal government. It has to be replicated at the state and at the LGA level. And of course, to be able to combat a target as big as this one, a challenge as big as this one, it needs the inputs of all Nigerians. And we cannot, I mean, this is not the responsibility of the government alone, neither the federal nor the local. The people themselves will need to do a lot about that.
Yes, but then the government always shows the way, if you permit me, because pollution has been observed to be a major challenge to availability of potable water to over 80% of Nigerians. In specific times, what would you think would be the immediate steps to be taken, perhaps by government in this case?
Well, the federal government, as I said, has taken the necessary steps. Now this needs to be replicated at the state level and at the LGA level. The work needs more than one component to happen at the same time. Without that, it cannot materialize. Now, the commitment is one thing, and we need leadership as well. We need leaders at the state level to show that they are committed. And committed is not only by saying, yes, we'll do it, is by holding their constituencies responsible for that. People themselves. Now there is a national communication campaign, Clean Nigeria, Build the Toilet, and it aims at changing the knowledge, the attitudes, and the practices of people so that they become more convinced that construction of a latrine that is something that needs to happen. Now, what also matters is the resources. The sector of WASH is not the only sector. I mean, it competes with education, it competes with health, and so on and so forth.
That exactly is my worry. So I'm wondering, that would be a hard sell for the government, wouldn't you say?
Now, let's take specifically ending open defecation. As per the national plan, 3/4 of the budget will need to come from the people themselves. And the importance in that is that people will only construct their latrines when they have the conviction that this is something that they will need to do. Now, some people will have the resources to construct the latrines. There are others who will need to borrow. We have put some mechanisms. But now, the most important thing that has been happening over the past 4 months is there is a high interest from the private sector. You know, the private sector in Nigeria is the dynamo of the economy. It can do a lot, and there is a lot of willingness. We need to regularize this willingness and make it happen. We need the states, the authorities, to provide the right enabling environment for those private businesses to come and work. And here, when I talk about private businesses or the private sector, we are not only aiming at getting their resources. The private sector is known for its effectiveness, its efficiency. Everything they do is better than the public sector. Okay, they know how to manage. We need them to build latrines. We need them to train entrepreneurs. We need their corporate social responsibility. We need them to sustain the services that are being provided. Without those happening at the same time, we will not be able to combat this challenge.
Mr. George, I hope that message gets across. I'd like to appreciate your coming on the program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Plead, Georgie, Chief of Section WASH Program.